I'm Jarrett Carpenter. This is More Than Blockchain, and today I get to talk with Patrick Skinner. Patrick Skinner and I met I'd say more than half a year ago at a crypto Web3 conference here in Bogota, where I am. Normally where he would be. Maybe we'll get into his story as to why he's not a very permissioned network. Today he joins me all the way from the US of A. Patrick, how are you?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Yeah, I don't even mind jumping into that. That's a great use case for some sort of decentralized permissionless stuff. But yeah, by all means, yeah. A little intro on me. I'm the lead Dev Rel for Forward Research, which is the company that actually originally launched Arweave, or at least the founder is the person that actually launched Arweave 6 years ago. In a couple weeks, we got Arweave Day coming up, and the birthday coming up pretty soon. And my whole purpose, I do a lot of focus on like our newer product, but I work from end to end, anybody and everybody, every single community inside the Arweave ecosystem. My job is a bit of an educator and to be able to like connect people to the right, to the right other communities, make sure that they don't have any issues building inside of the Arweave ecosystem. I love my job. This is really cool. I love being able to teach and connect and get people going in the right direction.
Sweet. Yeah, I obviously will shout out all your socials, but your Twitter is very helpful, I think, for anyone trying to wrap their head around Arweave and just other elements of Web3 and where things are going. And actually, when we met, you weren't working for Arweave. So I'd love for you to just kind of share why you decided to, invest your energy and why you love your job and what is it about Arweave that is special, because Arweave may not be a project that maybe is on people's radar, but I do think it's part of one of the bigger narratives that is going to take over this next bull run, and that being storage. And it sounds like you guys even have an AI component as well, which is another narrative. So why Arweave? Why did that grab your attention? Because like I said, I think when we met, you were kind of a Web3 gun for hire, if that makes sense. So to see you take your energy and, put it into Arweave, I'd love to hear more about that, because I don't think we've even spoken about that.
Yeah. Okay. So to be able to, man, I gotta say, working for Arweave has been kind of like the perfect dream job for me. And I gotta be able to go all the way back to my military career to kind of explain this a little bit. I joined the Army 2005, 2006 timeframe. So kind of the height of the war. And I came in as a paratrooper medic. So did the whole live fast, die hard, jump out of planes, all the kinds of craziness. And I ended up getting specialized in mass casualty coordination. Got a call super late. I think it was January 12th, 2010. They're like, hey, you're deploying, get your bags, you got to go. And I'm like, oh, shoot, where am I going? Afghanistan, Iraq, what's the big deal? No, you're going to Haiti. And I'm like, okay, all right. I'm kind of like a combat arms guy, but okay, I'll take the role. And sure enough, that's when that major earthquake had killed. I believe the death toll somewhere at this point ranging between 80,000 and 100,000 people, which is pretty wild. So roughly within about 24 hours, find myself in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and working as a mass casualty coordinator. It was chaos. It's probably the most chaos I've ever seen anywhere in my life. And I've been the mass casualty, I've done mass casualty coordination situations or volunteered for situations all the way back to Katrina. I was at the Astrodome for Katrina. Then there was Haiti. Then there was Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. I did some work for like the tsunami in Japan. So, I mean, I've seen chaos all around the world. And Haiti is still tops as the worst situation I've seen ever. And lo and behold, fast forward a couple weeks, we get an aftershock, a second earthquake, takes out more buildings. We're running around trying to find, survivors. We find a little boy named Arresto. And Arresto's 3 years old, but loses both of his parents in the earthquake. We ended up having to amputate his right arm and do like 100 stitches across his head. This is back when I was in special operations medicine, so I was doing some pretty crazy, medical stuff at the time. I did like 2 C-sections, I delivered like 9 kids. I was doing amputations and fasciotomies and all kinds of craziness because I at the time was like the highest level, of medicine that was available at that time, which is pretty wild. And to think that I was the highest level of medicine, and I'm 21 years old at the time, is pretty freaking wild. Arresto basically became like our adopted son. He was this bright-eyed boy, loved him to death. And one day, I go to clean up some of his surgical wounds, and give him some food, stuff like that. And he used to love wearing my army cap all the time. So every time I go to visit him, put my army cap on him. I leave the tent, and 5 minutes later, I was like, oh, forgot my army cap. So I would go back, and he's gone. I'm like, I don't know where he went. So trying to figure out what the hell's going on. I turn around, and there's like this volunteer just walking off with him, pretty fast too. It was an American guy, said he was from Florida, and he was wearing kind of like a church volunteer shirt. I run up to him like, hey, what are you doing with Arresto? Oh, we're taking all the kids in the hospital area to another location so they can be better cared for. To a sense, the hospital is chaos. It did make sense. But for Arresto was still going through a lot of treatment. And so, I was like, no, can't take Arresto. I'm still taking care of his surgical wounds. But do you have permission from the U.S. Army, because it's like U.S. Army area, to do this? And he's like, I didn't realize that was needed, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, no big deal. Like at that time, I didn't think anything of it because like the chaos was so crazy that anybody that looked like they were willing to help, you just accepted that they were there to do it. But that's when things got a little weird. I was like, hey, just, go around this corner here. U.S. Army Command's right there. You just talk to somebody. It'd probably take 5 minutes. I'll just take your ID information and then just make sure everything's cool. And he kind of did this awkward smile for me and took a beeline out of the hospital. That's when I got a little worried. So I go to U.S. Army Command. I was like, hey, I had this really weird interaction. I just want you guys to be aware of it. I didn't get a picture of him or anything like that, but just be aware. This is like I remember he had a specific church on his shirt. And so they basically put a flag on it, let all the guards know, hey, just keep an eye out for something like this. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he's caught on the border of the Dominican Republic with like 3 or 4 other dudes trying to smuggle about 40 Haitian kids in a Connex into the Dominican Republic, and we're going to sell them for labor, basically. And so basically that, our adopted son, Arresto, was almost human trafficked at that point. And that's when I really woke up to a really, really dark underbelly of the world, where in natural disasters is the easiest place to make people disappear. And I was like, man, that's a huge wake up call. And it's, I never thought I would find myself in a calling like that. So fast forward a couple years, I get out of the military. I start working in the private sector. I am teaching in the Middle East, mass casualty coordination. I'm teaching combat medicine. I'm teaching remote surgical skills, things like that. But between teaching, I'm working with like human trafficking interdiction teams in the Middle East and Northern Africa. And that was a big wake up call to me, because I'm thinking most of the time that human trafficking is synonymous with sex trafficking. At least that's what we hear. We hear that part. That's kind of like, I feel like that's the shock that gets people's attention to the whole situation. But in reality, sex trafficking is such a small part of human trafficking. And so I was like, okay, what's the number one part? Well, it's actually counterfeit production and counterfeit product trafficking. So I'm not talking like just Gucci bags. I'm talking counterfeit pharmaceuticals. I'm talking counterfeit electronics, car parts, like some of the most random things you wouldn't even think about. But those things are being counterfeited. They're being produced by forced labor, and then they're being trafficked somehow through some sort of means. And that's the number one revenue source for human trafficking around the world. Of course, there's obviously different types of human trafficking around the world, but a lot of the money comes from counterfeit production and counterfeit trafficking. And then from there, I told myself, if I could build something that would truly authenticate some sort of physical product, I want to be able to cut off the revenue source of all this counterfeit production. Because the moment I cut off the revenue source of the counterfeit production, then in that case, I can be able to possibly, you know, siphon, keep the money away from being able to even purchase humans from these human traffickers. So really being able to downsize a lot of the money that's going into that industry. And so lo and behold, it was about 2015. My wife and I we decided to move back from Abu Dhabi at the time, back to the United States, and have kids. And my wife's like, your career choice isn't ideal to be a dad. It's not exactly the safest career place. So maybe we should consider, changing careers. And I'm like, yeah. And so nothing's safer than software engineering. And I'm like, I might get carpal tunnel or something like that every now and then. That's the scariest thing for me right now. There's a little bit of back pain maybe. But I told myself at the time, I was like, you know what? I told myself I wanted to build something that could do that. Where better to do that than the technology sector? And so I was studying software engineering for a few years. I was bouncing around from different jobs to kind of make ends meet and things like that during the time. I started hearing about NFTs roughly about 2017. And then finally 2020 is when I was like, this is it. If I can use like NFT technology, or if I can use some sort of blockchain technology to authenticate physical products using maybe like QR codes, RFID, NFC chips, something like that, that's the case. Because all of the centralized options, they're spoofable to some degree. Like, it's so easy to spoof that kind of stuff. But with the blockchain side, it's really, really hard to spoof depending on how it's built. And as long as you try to get rid of every single centralized layer in the middle. It didn't take me long to discover Arweave. I ended up joining Developer DAO, which is a huge developer community, and these guys are constantly competing or hosting hackathons and stuff like that. And I came across my very first hackathon, I actually ended up winning, which is kind of like an IoT device as well. That was a natural disaster device, and I won that one, and that's when I was woken up to like this whole other world where people are kind of contacting me and saying, "Hey, that was a really cool build. That was or a really cool setup. Nice win. Blah blah blah. You should work on this. You should work on this." And so my attention is being pulled in so many directions. But I met Phil Billingsby, who was a Dev Rel for Arweave at the time, and he introduced me to Arweave. And so this is about 4 years ago at this time, 3 or 4 years ago at this time, and as I'm getting introduced, I'm like, okay, I can see where we could do like a front end side, we could do the back end side, and we could have some sort of authentication in the middle. I could possibly set up some NFC RFID chips to do this, and that's when I just went full in with Arweave, because every single option I dug everywhere, especially because everything on EVM is so sexy. Everybody wanted to work on EVM. Everybody wanted to work on Ethereum, Optimism, Avalanche, all of these other options. But nobody had that full stack capability, static front end pages, data being stored basically for pennies on the dollar, or being compressed to the point where you don't have to pay anything, for the back end. The most complicated part at that time was, how do you figure out that middle layer? How do you allow that communication from front end to back end? And that was the most complicated part. But I fell in love with Arweave. So I've competed in every single Arweave hackathon for the last 2 or 3 years, except for the ones that I'm not allowed to compete anymore. I work there now. And so, I really wanted to build, that kind of technology. So I started a startup called Agami. This is before I started working for Arweave, and Agami was basically that technology where we were building things to try to, and we started with like pharmaceuticals. We wanted to be able to like authenticate pharmaceuticals. That was a big thing for me because it was showing data-wise roughly about 200,000 kids a year were dying from prescription drugs that were being given to them from a pharmacist. But the pharmacists themselves didn't realize that somewhere in transit, they had been swapped out bad drugs. And so I was like, this is a really big global problem. This thing needs to get fixed. And so we started pharmaceuticals. Now, because we were really focused on NFT and the NFT market took a huge hit, we could never get any funding. And so like we never really got very far with it. We did build some really, really cool prototypes and everything. And I will get back to that technology soon. But I fell in love with just the Arweave ecosystem in the process. I fell in love with the communities. I fell in love with everybody's mission, because on the EVM side, you find some people that are really like, they have some amazing backstories. They have some, like, they are really, really into what they're building, and they have some very good use cases of what they're building for. But then, to be honest, like, it's kind of hard to find them sometimes, because you got to swim through all the NFT traders and all of the, the DeFi people that are just kind of building just to kind of like honestly make money, things like that, which is no hate on them whatsoever. But on the Arweave side, I've heard some wild and amazing backstories as to why people are building inside of Arweave. And that's kind of where I found my home. And so long story, but that's how I got here.
It's a long story, but it's a necessary story. And I think that's something that you and I probably share. We both have a history in the past of working in maybe more humanitarian, international development kind of realms. And it's something we've actually never even talked about. Most times we actually talk about hockey, and I probably should get out one day to come play hockey with you here in Bogota, which is a whole different story. But let's just go right there. I'd love to hear some other backstories of people that see the value and maybe a solution set within Arweave, and that have kind of looked at that as you have as well and said, no, this is where I want to invest my time. This is where I want to invest my energy, because I'm really trying to make a real world solution. And I think before I pass you the mic, I want to say, I think it's great that you've talked about the ability for blockchain, the blockchain-backed ecosystems to potentially solve real-world problems, because a lot of the conversations right now that's happening around Capitol Hill and on Capitol Hill is that blockchain doesn't have purpose, and it's just tied to a global value network that may interrupt essentially legacy systems that are in place that we being the government, the U.S. government, already have a lot of control over. So I think it's really great to hear you talk about blockchain being a solution, even just for human trafficking. Human trafficking is something that I've recently talked about with pig butchering. Pig butchering is all about human trafficking. In another article I've written that had nothing to do with Web3, it was talking about the 2022 World Cup and how so much human trafficking had to happen in order for Qatar to basically be able to build all their stadiums and the thousands of people that died there. So human trafficking, I think, is something that is starting to be a part of almost every single value chain in the world, no matter what it is, as you've talked about. So to think about blockchain being a potential solution to mitigate some of the reward or profit incentive there is absolutely wonderful. So with that, please talk about other backgrounds that are kind of maybe out of the ordinary and maybe not stuff you would see on EVM, where people are being drawn to Arweave due to, maybe it's more full stack capabilities.
So I think it's so easy to find so many interesting backstories on Arweave, because Arweave never had the sex appeal of like DeFi. That wasn't ever really a major focus. So when people came to build, they came to build, and they didn't want to be able to build something, be like, oh, hey, this cool DeFi thing, and people come in and buy the new token, or they try to do the airdrops and all that craziness, and so I don't think we've almost ever until recently ever had a single airdrop farmer come into the Arweave ecosystem, because it didn't have that sex appeal. It didn't have that idea of like, oh wow, I can make a bit of cash or anything like that. You came to build. And so the most active communities, this is really interesting for me too. And I can't wait to try to build more community awareness and everything in Latam for Arweave. But the most active communities are Nigeria. We have a small community called Arweave Nigeria. We have Arweave Oasis, which is, I could not believe, I had been working here for 3 or 4 months, and it wasn't until I actually did a webinar for Arweave Oasis community and realized this isn't like 50 or 60 people. This is like 400 something developers in here, and they're super engaged and building a lot of different cool stuff. And so that was super surprising. So the Arweave Oasis in China, and then we have Arweave in India, which is probably some of the coolest development I've ever seen. One of the coolest things I've seen is there's a new a camera called Clickor, the OOOR, where somebody made basically kind of like a Raspberry Pi basic, camera functions. And when you take a picture, that picture gets stored permanently on the Arweave blockchain. I think that's so freaking cool. And I've never seen a device that would do something like that. It's a great use case and what you could do in the future with that is just really amazing. I foresee a lot of things being built based on that type of technology in the near future. But as far as like stories and everything, I actually have to lean towards Qatar, and that whole story is amazing use case. And we actually have one person that is building solely because of that whole situation. I believe there was a relative or something like that came from India, and they just got stuck there. I believe they got really, really sick. I know at this point, I'd have to ask more context. I think it was an uncle. The uncle did not die, but they almost died. And I think they did have like permanent debilitating issues after the fact. But he couldn't come home after getting injured or sick or anything like that. They were holding on to his passport. And so without the passport, like you couldn't go anywhere. There was no ability. And I think the scariest, wildest part about that is it was years before even the World Cup even was hosted. There are tons of videos showing the conditions these people are in, showing exactly what that process was like. They were going behind the scenes, undercover and everything. You could see the nitty gritty dirty of it. And not only were they just not being heard half the time, their viewerships were being almost like shadow banned and stuff on like YouTube and Twitter and stuff like that. They were purposely being silenced. And to me, I'm just like, first off, as a human, even in a centralized state, how do you look at that and be like, yeah, people can't see this? Where is the humanity behind that? And it is terrifying to think that somebody at some point had to make a conscious decision. It wasn't an automated thing. It wasn't like, oh, hey, the algorithm accidentally did this. Somebody had to have gone behind the scenes and said, we have to push this down. That is absolutely terrifying to me that that's even a thing. So, this person, along with some of the other people they're working with, they're building a ability to identify yourself. They're kind of like ZK proofing kind of systems. I'm sure you might be familiar with using some sort of ZK proofing just for identity, and because you have that Permaweb application, that Permaweb capability, it can't be spoofed. That the permanent page is there. And the beautiful thing is, like, you don't have to pay monthly for it. You don't have to pay monthly for, like this website that, authenticates your information or anything like that. Once it's there, it's there. That's one of the reasons why I did that, because I thought, with like Arweave and, trying to prove, physical products, I thought, well, pharmaceuticals last 6 months at best. But what if I have to prove a Rolex? Well, if I try to do that, which is a general website, I'm dead and gone. Nobody's there to continue to pay for the domain, or nobody's there to continue to pay for the hosting. So if somebody tries to scan that Rolex or something like that, it's gone. So imagine that with like a human, you're basically having to tether that person to having to pay to play, pay to have identity. And that's terrifying, just to think that that's even a thing. And so with the Permaweb application capability, and then being able to authenticate that information from the backend on Arweave, once it's there, it's there. When that person dies, their identity will still be there to some degree. You can still see some information about that person. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that's an amazing idea, to think that no matter what, whether it's my identity, whether it's my story, whether it's family photos from Clicker, the camera or anything like that, that stuff is what we like to say is we have a minimum permanence of 200 years on the Arweave blockchain. And that is just freaking beautiful to think that I don't have to pay to play to be a citizen somewhere. I don't have to pay to play to prove who I am. I should not have to worry about some sort of centralized entity that says, here's your passport and things like that. This is me. This is who I am. This is where I was born. And it's just kind of a terrifying thought that so many people lost their lives to FIFA and, channels like YouTube, channels like Twitter at the time. They said, sorry, but there's money on the line, and putting a dollar value on these humans is it's honestly a disgusting behavior. That's why we're really pushing into a lot of the video storage stuff that's happening, very, very soon, as well as just the, identity and just being able to prove actions, being able to prove authenticity of like a product, authenticity of self. It's a big and very important thing for us. And so that's why we don't care about really token price very often. And so everybody you find in the ecosystem really doesn't, they don't focus at all on token price. We're there to build. We're there to build with a mission.
Yeah, it's really, I didn't expect us to talk about Qatar today and the World Cup, but like I said, I wrote this article and it is quite crazy that there was stuff coming out since like 2017, 2018, as they started to build these stadiums that showed human trafficking and showed human trafficking conditions. And a lot of the labor was brought in from, I believe, Nepal, Bangladesh, India, that area. Yeah. They would come, they would be stripped of their passports, and then they would be told to work 16 hours a day, right? Or they didn't eat and they were beaten, and thousands of workers died. In fact, I don't even know if there's actually an official number, just due to the suppression of information and how the Qatari government kind of did that. With this podcast eventually out there, I don't know if I'll ever be able to go to Qatar, and that, and also having that on my Medium, because I was really, pretty much against FIFA and what they were doing. But unfortunately, that's kind of the world we're in. We have all the way back from 2014 with Eric Garner getting, killed by police on camera. We have George Floyd more recently getting killed by police on camera. And it's almost like humans are becoming now so desensitized to even video. This is even pre-AI, I'm using air quotes, where now I worry in the world of AI, there's going to be something that happens that was actually AI generated, and it was done to start whatever against a local police. I'll just use the police example, or, an authority example. And so it's just kind of like, in that world, having something that is, as you've called out, ZK proofs, zero knowledge proofs, but having something that could live on the internet, it could live on the internet forever in a decentralized manner, is something we've really never had happen. Because say you and I have a video and you're in the States and you and I meet up in Chicago or something. We put up a video on the internet and we put it on Twitter because we're like, okay, that's a place where people can go, drag it off and bring it to other socials. And we put it on YouTube. YouTube could take it down in 5 seconds. Twitter could honestly decide that they don't want it there. And then it's like it never happened. And then so it's like, okay, you and I are like, well, why don't we put it up on a web page, and we'll create a Gmail, and then we'll throw it up on a Wix or something, because we want to separate ourselves from it, because it's damning. It's a damning evidence. Well, like you said, then we have to deal with hosting. Then we have to deal with who owns the domain. And so there's not great ways to kind of put something up on the community bulletin board that no one can take down. So yeah, if you could speak more about that permanence, that to me is absolutely fascinating, because there's definitely a future, right, where you're going to want to have your passport up on Permaweb passport, right? Because when you go traveling, for example, they always say, like, for example, my passport, the way I do it, I live somewhere between Colombia and the United States, as you do as well. I always have my passport up in my Google Drive. I have an image of it. And I also have it sitting on 2 or 3 different, I've sent it to 2 or 3 different emails that I have access to. So in the event that I were to lose it, I could at least go get a digital copy, which would probably help me as I go to the embassy in Colombia, if I need to do that, or if I'm in Lima and I have to go to, if I'm in Peru and I have to go to the embassy. But I could totally foresee a thing in the future where you just, on the Permaweb, I just upload my passport. And then I have I don't know, maybe an encrypted way that only I can get to it in the event that I need to get to it. But what are the other use cases that you are currently seeing for this type of putting something up, I guess as I'm calling it, on the community bulletin board that no one can take down? The analogy being putting something up on the internet that no one can take down. What are people doing right now as cool use cases? And then what are things you think are going to probably continue to happen as we move forward over this next bull run and more people kind of wake up to what Arweave is doing? Once again, not focused on the token price, but more focused on the ability and the use case of being able to do potentially crazy things. Because I told you before this, and I'm going to do this because I have a couple projects in my head I'd like to kind of execute, but having the Permaweb is incredible. Because right now, if I want to put something up, and I have multiple Squarespace sites that I have for myself and for More Than Blockchain, I have to pay that every year, right? I have to make sure the domain is still linked from GoDaddy. It's not cheap. It's not cheap. It's like a couple $100 every year. And honestly, a couple $100 every year, maybe from someone from the States, isn't that much. But for the rest of the world, a couple $100 could be 2 or 3 months work, like wages. So then how do you put something up on the internet? Because you don't want to just put it up on a centralized social media source, maybe. So anyways, what are some things that people are using now for this permanent community board? And then what are some things that you're excited to see that you're like kind of dreaming, but you know that our dreams in Web3 eventually come reality sooner than we think?
So one of my favorite things to talk about too is like, let's say you have a blog and you've moved off of Medium or anything like that, or maybe you're routing, a domain to Medium, something to that effect. And you're just the viewers and the readers and stuff, it's starting to crank a little bit. Like, you've done it 2 or 3 years, something like that. And the numbers start going up. Have you ever heard the story of this happening where like, okay, this blog or whatever is popping off, and then the domain needs to be re-upped? But now because you've got massive traffic, you don't own that domain. You don't, like you own it, but you don't own it because that re-up fee suddenly is like $200. And I'm like, dude, I paid $7 for this like a few years ago. Why is it suddenly $200? Or why is it even like, I've seen as high as like $500? And it had nothing to do with, so-and-so, bought it, now you got to buy it from another person. No, it's just that hosting or GoDaddy or anything said, wow, you're getting a lot of traffic. I bet you're willing to pay quite a bit to keep that traffic to that domain. And sure enough, dude, it's like, you're basically being held hostage for a domain that you kind of think you own, but you really don't own. That to me, that's one use case. It's just like, holy shit, like really? Like that's a massive thing. That's just terrifying to think that like any of those companies, from down to the very domain, can hold you hostage at any moment whatsoever. Hosting itself is, that alone, obviously you have to pay regularly for. But all it takes is a couple emails to a couple of the organizations and everything that can say, hey, we got a report from these lawyers that said that your information, they didn't like that information, or it's defamation or something like that. They make you whatever use case. And they can do a legal appeal to take down your website. That is just asinine to me, whether it's truthful or not. I've seen this in a couple of cases where somebody was a really, really big influencer and they came out with a fraud page. So basically this person was committing fraud against like these different businesses. That person hired a legal firm, and that legal firm basically got a court appeal saying like this is possible defamation. So because it's possible defamation, we get to take basically a stamp of approval from the judge, and then that judge, they send that stamp of approval to that organization, take down the website. I think it was like 2 or 3 years later, they found out that the person was performing defamation. But the fact of the matter was that these people were trying to warn people about this person, and legal firm gets to take it down. So then he gets to basically continue to defraud people over the next 2 or 3 years because that website got taken down. And so, I mean, so we started at domains. We're talking about hosting. Now we're even talking about databases. This could be Cloudinary. This could be, MongoDB. This could be any of those situations. And if somebody says that that information should not be there, should not be readily accessible, somebody at the those databases can basically just turn you off. If not that, the moment you stop paying is the moment like all that information is no longer available. I understand why the payment model is done that way, simply because, I mean, as a centralized entity, you're probably renting space on some sort of server. Somebody has to keep the lights on. Somebody's physically there, so somebody has to be paid monthly, either the electricity bills or the manpower for maintenance and stuff like that. That stuff costs money per month to them. So of course that cost gets pushed to you as the user. But our model, which is kind of consistent throughout all of blockchain, having the various validators and things like that, that model is so much more sustainable. Being able to have that information stored and not have to pay monthly for it, it makes so much more sense. Now, going down to, let's say, the identity and everything to that extent, one of the things I like to do for my websites, this is actually really easy, really cool. I even did this before I even started using Permaweb pages. I wanted I had a problem where I would put up a website and then maybe I would stop using the G drive, or I'd stop using the Dropbox or something like that. And I would store my website images on G drive or on Dropbox or anything like that. It was just easy because you could put it on there and then you kind of get like a hosted link and then you just embed that into your website so it pops up on your website very, very easily. That way, depending, let's say you're using Squarespace. Squarespace, you run into an issue where you have a limit amount of storage that you can have. So, depending on how robust your website is, you can only have so many images or videos or anything like that stored on there. So, you kind of go through this backdoor way of having these hyperlink things, but then for some reason, maybe a link gets refreshed. Maybe you moved a file by accident inside your Dropbox or something like that, or inside of your G drive. The website has a bunch of broken links now, and those images don't work. Or you're paying for storage, and because you're paying for storage, the moment you stop paying for that storage is the moment those websites, the images are no longer available on the website. So what I like to use, a great product, is called Arweave. Arweave is basically kind of like a Dropbox equivalent or a G drive equivalent on the Arweave blockchain. It's so easy to set up too. You set it up you can set it up in a very Web 2 fashion. You can pay fiat currency, and all you have to do is you just pay for the storage to be available to you one time. It's a one-time payment. And so if I need another 2 gigabytes, I pay, basically, 2 gigabytes worth for that storage. And then I don't have to pay monthly. And so I put all of my website images on there because it's super easy to host your images there. And I actually, a really cool thing to do too is I put my resumes on there because I never have to worry about my resumes suddenly not being available on a website, or suddenly, maybe I have that link and I've sent that link to a recruiter a year ago. And that person's, oh, hey, he came up and we have this new job. He looks like a perfect fit. And you look and they go to click on your resume and it doesn't work anymore because it was on a centralized storage that you're paying monthly for. You moved the link or you stop paying for it. So it's no longer available. But with Arweave, it has permanent storage. And I never have to worry about those links changing or anything like that. It's going to be always consistently be able to do that. So here's a little workaround I'll tell you, since we are eventually going to talk about like Permaweb pages and things. Instead of putting the images directly on the Permaweb page that you're going to set up an Arweave account, and you get, I'll have to look again how much free storage you get, but put all your images there, and then take the link from the Arweave account and then just put that link as the embeddable image on your Permaweb page. because it doesn't increase your storage beyond 100 kilobytes. And so that way, when you actually deploy your Permaweb page, all your images are being stored on our drive, and that Permaweb goes up, and it's under 100 kilobytes, so it's free. So it's like a permanently stored 200-year, permanence website, and you don't have to worry about the images ever disappearing, ever, even beyond when you die, and then that website will never change either. You can go back and make changes. It's not like it gets cemented in stone where you can't make changes in the future. But you'll be able to make those changes and not have to worry about all the craziness of like centralized, making sure I'm paying for this, because that stuff adds up. I'm thinking a domain annually, brand new domain, you're $14 to $25. You're probably paying $25 to $35 for like Squarespace or something like that per month. And then, anything additional, maybe you have some additional features or something like that, you might have to pay $5, $10, $15 a month. So you're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars really, really quickly add up, per year, while you can pretty much get all of that almost, done on the Permaweb for free, as long as you know how to like set everything up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I built websites for small businesses starting in like 2017. My buddy has a tile business in Boston, and I had built a website for myself for a project I had going, and he saw it. He's like, "Hey, can you build a website for me? I have this older website, and he wanted also the thing about Squarespace, which is great, is he wanted to be able to have access to be able to upload a photo or change something really quickly without having to basically talk to his dev or talk to, the person who would help him set up his original website back in like 2009. So I ended up building his website, and then I ended up building probably 30 websites over the, since then, here or there, for small businesses. But one of the hardest things was when someone's credit card would expire. And then all of a sudden it broke everything. It didn't pay the monthly, so then it broke. Or it didn't re-up the domain on GoDaddy, the annual domain. It just happened to be a timing issue. And then somebody went, like you said, or we didn't talk about this exact example. You said, GoDaddy may run up the price if they were successful. But then there are bots that will then go buy PatrickSkinnerCreates.com because PatrickSkinnerCreates.com gets a lot of web traffic. So the bots will buy it, and then they, and then they hold you over the fire, over the coals, where you were paying $10 a month, and now they want $1,000 just to give you the domain back that is yours, in air quotes. So that is totally true. And the other thing is, if you have, like, for example, my credit card, in my own experience right now, it's tied to multiple different things, multiple domains, multiple websites. Let's say I'm traveling and that gets lost, so I have to cancel that credit card. That could cause a cascading event that just like messes up my entire online presence that I don't even want to think about. So I'm going to knock on wood, right? But clearly that's where the Permawebs definitely come in. So how many Permawebs currently are created and are up and running right now with the Arweave ecosystem?
I'd have to look at the exact number, but it's well over thousands. It's thousands of pages. And I think I myself have like 9 or 10 of them.
Wait, 9 or 10. Please break down what you have up there, because you have 9 or 10 different things you have to have on the internet. You've talked about your resumes and other stuff, but what else?
Yeah, so like a couple of them were. My very first one was I just did a really quick like tutorial from Natter Dabbit. For those that don't know, Natter is like major OG Dev Rel. All the other DevRels bow before his presence, kind of thing, of in the Web3 space. But he's a great dude. He's a founder of a developer DAO, and I watched a video years ago while I was still kind of getting introduced into the Arweave ecosystem, and he was just kind of showing like the no code way of doing that. So it's just me messing around, and it's funny because like as soon as I put it together and I hit deploy, that thing's up there, and it's up there. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so like, all right, that's my first one. And then the second one was like, hey, I want to build basically kind of like just a portfolio page, just like Natter has. Because Natter, I think he still has a, just basically kind of like a portfolio landing page that's like, hey, this is my picture, this is my title, here's all my social links, and and here's like a link to my resume. I think that's how I discovered our drive. Where okay, I'm going to store my resume on our drive and then link it to the perma page. That's cool. and then and then he had like links to his GitHub and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I'll build something like that. So I have, I think, my first one kind of like that, and then I ended up building like a second one, but it was like for something totally different, because I thought to myself, this one's for engineering, but I also want one that I can send people for, let's say, developer relation services. And I want one that's just for my personal content, like my YouTube channel, my Twitter, that kind of stuff. And so I have several, three or four different ones. They're all kind of like personality based. It just depends, like, what kind of personality do you want of Patrick Skinner? Do you need the creator one? Do you need the Dev Rel one? You need the engineer one? All right, I got a link for that, and so I'll send it over. And so I have several different ones like that. I think I all of my projects, all my hackathon projects, the ones that I build into, I'm like, this is a really freaking cool thing. So I'll put together a Permaweb page for it. It's basic. Maybe it's like, it's got a link to the white paper. Oh yeah, all my white papers, all the white papers of anything I've ever developed, I've hosted on our drive, and then I put it onto a Permaweb page. And then maybe the logo's on there, brief explanation of what I built. Here's the link to the GitHub, or here's an active link to the actual project, something like that. There's a Permaweb page for that too. And it's nice because I can put it up. It's really, really simple. It's clear to the point exactly what it's supposed to be. And I don't have to worry about a hackathon project that I put together, and I don't have to pay for the domain annually or anything like that, because it's just going to be there. And so I love that as a feature. You mentioned bots that will like try to wait for your domain to expire or something like that. Maybe you forgot to set it up. Did you know that happened to Twitter a few years ago?
I don't think I knew that.
So Twitter's domain expired, and somebody noticed it. It was actually, I think it was some sort of engineer from Caltech or something like that. He was another engineer. Or no, sorry, like he was in Seattle. That's right. And he just happened to notice I could buy Twitter right now. I don't know why, but I could buy Twitter. He bought it for a couple grand from the hosting service, and then there was like an announcement on Twitter. It was like, hey, whoever bought our domain, can you please give it back to us? And he was like super chill about it. I think they gave him something between the lines of like 10 and 20 grand, because somebody could have really freaking held that hostage and made him pay several $100,000. And he ended up, I think he took the entire amount that they gave him and gave it to some sort of charity or something like that. So they were lucky that it was that guy and not some Chinese bot farmer guy that was like, you must give me 250,000. I'm thinking in like Jin Yang's voice off of Silicon Valley, and it was like, you must give me 250,000 for this domain now. Like that could have happened, but they lucked out, and it was just because that guy just happened to notice it was available. It was pretty wild. So yeah, that can very well happen. But yeah, of my 9 pages, they're usually of like a personality or a hackathon project. And they're so easy to put together. That's the other thing. I built Squarespace pages, and I deployed, straight just raw code pages and everything like that before. And it always takes me time because you got to go through a template and stuff like that. And as soon as you kind of get the images and stuff in there, then you got to pay for either the domain through Squarespace or through another point, and then you got to route the DNS, and then you got to pay for the hosting, and then that takes a little bit of time to turn on, and there it goes. With Permaweb pages, it's so easy for me to put together that I get all the static information in there, get it exactly how I want it, and as soon as it's done, deploy. And it takes a few seconds to put kind of like a temporary deployment, and then it takes about 30 minutes to propagate on Arweave, and then you've got an available public link, and you can use that public link. Now the link is super long, so instead of using that ridiculously long link, you can go to what's called ar.io or r.io, however you want to call it, and then you can buy a permanent your domain there, and then just have that link route to that domain. And honestly, I think Permaweb pages is so much easier than most of the centralized options.
I need to look into this because this sounds so fascinating. And anyone who's ever built a website or has owned a website, right? Now we're talking about ownership, or has had a website through somebody else did it for them, like somebody came to hire me, or they have their Squarespace or whatever it is, because this is fascinating because you said two things here. You said, one, you could go pay a one-time fee for a domain and have it forever. And the other thing you've said is that you can pay for a couple gigs of storage and then have those forever. How does that necessarily work? Like, how are you able to do that? Yet, if I want to go get storage through Google Drive, through Dropbox, through whatever Apple's thing is,
iCloud.
iCloud, thank you. You have to pay monthly. Apple famously has that bundle of like Apple One where you get Apple TV, Apple Plus, you get a certain amount, maybe you get like a terabyte of storage. And I have many friends who have this package just for the storage feature. But how is it that, Arweave is able to do that? Because if Arweave is able to do this, right? Eventually, I would assume as Arweave becomes more known and these type of file solutions, file storage solutions, decentralized file storage solutions become more known, I would assume that they would then drive the price of storage for Google and Dropbox and iCloud down if there's competition, right? Because they're just going to be undercutting everyone and you don't have this subscription fee set up, which honestly, everyone listening to this is paying for a subscription of one service or another because that's the world we live in. Like I pay for so many. I have Canva, the thing we're even recording on right now, Riverside. I have so many. I try not to have any entertainment ones. I have no Netflix or Spotify or any of that, but
I got so many. So I got to pay for a couple of those. So yeah,
I'm sure. And most people do. And honestly, I borrow codes from other people, right? I'll be very honest about that, right? Like, but in order for me to even put this podcast out, I am tied into subscriptions, both in storage and production. Everything that you see that I put out comes from something I'm paying for. So if the future is, and the future is now, right, where you guys are saying, no, you pay a one time, you get a couple gigs. You pay a one time, you get a domain, and it's there. In the story in my head is that eventually is going to drive the competition to respond, right?
I think so. And to some degree, they have responded in some facets. Like, obviously, a lot of these companies have, they have entire departments dedicated to like decentralized research and things like that too. So they are responding to some degree. They just haven't really figured out, okay, what's a scalable solution? So like an example would be like, when talking about like Agami, the NFC RFID kind of model, Amazon dumped millions into buying small startups and things like that were using decentralized technology for supply chain, which is kind of the same methodology they were using NFC RFID. And they were using that to be able to use, track their supply chain details. And none of that could be spoofed or anything like that. So there's kind of a security model there, which I love that they did that. I love that they're responding to that kind of stuff. Because obviously there means that there's, there's the solution is sound. The solution makes sense if a company like Amazon's willing to drop a few million into doing something like that. Now, as far as storage, I don't think the competition has responded too much yet. And the reason why is because they rely deeply on ecosystems. And so Google, or just Gmail, Google, and things like that, they rely heavily on the ecosystem because like you don't go get a Hotmail, you don't go get a Yahoo email or anything like that. Not because, oh, well, I just want to get a Gmail. You get the Gmail because it comes with Google Drive. It comes with, Google, what's it called? Google Docs, Google Sheets.
It comes with like Google Meet. I sit on Google Meets all day.
Meet, Google Calendar. Like you have this ecosystem, okay? So they don't respond too much because in order to be able to use our drive, it takes a couple extra steps to use that. And that extra steps to a lot of people is worth the money sometimes. I'll just use Google Drive. It's easy for me to share things, a lot of interconnectability and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, as as Arweave rather, develops their ecosystem more and more and more, you're going to find yourself end up finding, okay, maybe there's something to this whole Arweave ecosystem that's not only just a more affordable, but maybe a challengeable, ecosystem to some of those giants. Now, I would say the biggest thing that we've been missing to be able to build that ecosystem is that communication layer, is that computation layer, being able to with email, you have to have a lot of computation in that middle layer to be able to quickly send emails and be able to upload images and send those very, very quickly. Google Meets is that video layer, trying to actually stream data. That data streaming kind of capability is very, very difficult to do on blockchain. Now we've launched AO, which is short for actor oriented, and it's that decentralized computer kind of thing, and it allows you to really run computation really, really lightly, but all on chain through that virtual machine. What's really cool about it is we now have active bounties for developers to set up video streaming on Arweave, to set up calls on Arweave, to be able to actually, quickly, instant messages on Arweave. We already have that part. That part's already locked in. We don't have a bounty for it yet, but I actually probably should call Tom and be like, hey, we should do a bounty for like some sort of Arweave email, because that's a pretty low hanging fruit now, all with AO. And that AO being existing inside of Arweave, I foresee that we could very well challenge, and I'd love to see how they respond. When they realize, okay, that storage thing is pretty freaking cool. They only have to pay one-time fee, and that's it. That's pretty wild. And so they're going to do two things. They're going to either A, come up with their own decentralized layer, or B, they're going to have to really push the scalability of their ecosystem and really start presenting even more features. Or and like obviously one of the features that they have already presented is Gemini, their AI. It's free. I don't have to pay for Gemini, and I can use that LLM. And that LLM, I love Gemini for the fact that it uses all of Google's databases, and it uses all the search functionality. You could pull links and stuff like that really, really easily. But they messed up because they made it so centralized. And did you hear about the whole image generation thing with them? Where you couldn't generate a white person if you even put a white man with this and this and this, it'd still come up with something else. And so they really bit themselves in the ass with that. But and now we already have our LLM on there. Now it doesn't do image generation or anything yet, but that is a near capability. We will have that eventually. And so I'd love to see how they do react when we kind of get to that point. The permanent storage thing is just, honestly, it's such a game changer, not only just because I don't have to pay monthly, but I mean, the fact that there isn't a centralized entity in the world that can say that shouldn't be there. I love that. I really love that. I'm able to say the truth. Maybe it's not your truth. Maybe it's my truth. Maybe it's my story. Hell, maybe it's a family photo. Maybe it's a photo of a politician that probably shouldn't be doing what they're doing. Who knows? And who knows what the use case is? But at the end of the day, truth, unfiltered truth, has become more and more important, because they hide behind the fact that they say that they're kind of like being world police, which at the end of the day, that's exactly what they are. They don't necessarily need to answer to any government agency in the world to say, oh, hey, I'm allowed to take that down. Now, of course, there are government entities that say, we don't want this information that you're providing available in our country. And they do it. They toe the line because it's money to them. But at the end of the day, too, they can also say that we've seen in the past in the United States, with elections and things like that, these entities will say, well, we don't really align with this side of the politics, so let's push this down. So we're going to push this side up, and it's wild. It's wild that they get to control the narrative. In Arweave, nobody really controls the narrative. It's permissions.
Yeah, and along those lines, are there perma pages, or how are people interacting with Arweave's ecosystem to be able to put immutable things out on the internet? Because I think this is something, when I talk about it, especially in the United States, and especially with some of my friends from Web3, if they're listening at all, they know who I'm talking about. But we talk about this a lot, where they may not see that as a plus to the idea of blockchain, or maybe some of the ethos of crypto, or having something that could be immutable, or something that could be publicly, transparent and immutability. Those aren't necessarily things that maybe for people in the United States are, as you used the words earlier, also I'll say it again, sex appeal. It's just not something that really drives attention towards these networks. But I have to say, and I talk about this a lot, and I'll talk about it at length, basically for the rest of the world, and even for people in the United States, but for other people in the rest of the world, they really see the value in this, because an entire country will just turn off Twitter, for example. An entire country will just say, nope, you can't look at that anymore. Even Canada. In Canada right now, or at least it was this way, you couldn't look at Instagram. There were certain things in Meta you couldn't look at across the Meta ecosystem between Facebook and Instagram. So being able to put something out on the internet that can kind of be immutable, like you said, whether it may not be your truth, but it's my truth, how are people using that? And I guess in my mind's eye, I'm thinking, someone is in a country that their literal political beliefs don't line with the current administrations. Therefore, anything they put on social media is going to get taken down, or they're going to get in trouble. So, how are people using this to basically speak truth to power digitally?
So I think we have like 2 websites where you can put your podcasts on there immutably, which is really freaking cool because there's some cool topics on there. I haven't gone through it too much, but there are some really, really interesting topics of what people have put on. I think it's called Permacast is one of them, Permacast, and a lot of them are there's a lot of topics on there that are very politically driven. And they do that so that they don't have to worry about some sort of centralized entity taking down their information. And there's a lot of people saying things and putting things on Permacast that you typically would not see ranked anywhere, on Apple Podcast or any of the other podcast platforms, Spotify, anything like that. And so there's a lot of truth to power being spoken, which is really cool because, like, imagining being able to just sit there and listen, which I do believe you can listen to all the podcasts on mobile as well. I'm 99% sure. And you have that ability to store those files, store the actual, audio files and everything, and actively stream those audio files in a fully decentralized way where nobody in any way can take down that information. It's wild. It's really, really cool. That's one. We do have some video stuff. We'll have a really big announcement coming up soon. I can't say too much on it, but we will have a new layer that will be available for video that is 100% comparable in comparison to YouTube. And that platform already has hours and days worth of videos on there, as well as some very, very prominent figures are already storing a lot of their videos on that platform. So that's going to be a really, really cool announcement to happen in the next couple weeks. I think we actually have a video announcement coming out either next week or the week after. And so that's going to be one that's going to change the game. Really, is seeing a lot of the unfiltered, decentralized, essentially unfiltered, decentralized YouTube being available very soon in the next couple weeks. Blogs. We have lots of different blogs. You can actually set up your Permaweb page to, I think, in essence, to be a blog. I'll have to see if that feature is still available. But I've actually deployed. I should actually probably write a new video tutorial on how to build a blog on the Permaweb. But it's 100% a capable option where you can just have your set up from end to end. You have your static page and you have all your blogs available and everything, blog articles and everything available on that page. And that's 100% a comparable capability inside of the Arweave ecosystem. A lot of truth to power comes to that. I have seen a lot of, one of the ones that seems to be, I just saw this recently. Venezuela is getting super busy in the Arweave ecosystem. A lot of people are posting articles and audio and things like that from Venezuela about a lot of the things that are happening in the political atmosphere. Wild. And that was something like none of us really saw that coming. Nobody from that world really came to us and said, hey, help us with this. They just did it, which is awesome. I love that. And so you're seeing that more. Our community in China is very, very active and busy with blogs and audio and things like that as well. So yeah, you're seeing a lot of truth to power. I think one of my favorite things that we have that it was a very, very early use case was we have several banned books that are on the Permaweb. So if you ever go back and listen to one of our co-founders, Sam, Sam talks a lot about his inspiration from a book series called the Gulag Archipelago. Have you ever heard of this? It's okay. So just to run through it really fast, it's very long. It's a very long book, but it's 100% worth it. And essentially, it's a story from a Russian author that came to the United States, and it was his experience during the Gulag Archipelago, which is during a time of Russia where, I mean, anybody and everybody can arrest somebody, and as long as you had this like special card to some fact, and you could have just said the wrong thing. Somebody could have just not liked you and said that you said these things, and people were getting sent to the gulags constantly, daily, and they would just disappear and die in the gulags. And the story is very graphic and very powerful, speaks a lot of truth. And I love the story because in its essence is kind of decentralized in its own essence because the author not only wrote it from his perspective, but he wrote it from, I think, 50 something other people's perspective as well. And it's an amazing series to hear the painful story of what permission can really look like, what silencing really, really looks like to some degree. And so the Gulag Archipelago is an amazing story. And then, so I believe we have the Gulag Archipelago available on the Permaweb, but we also have like 1984 and a lot of these other books that are considered in that like banned section kind of thing. And most of these banned books have some sort of political layer to it. I believe we have a book from a political member from many years ago during the Cuban Missile Crisis from the Cuban side. And so it's just interesting to see a lot of these stories on there. It's stories that you would never think were even out there. Like, I mean, we hear wild stories all the time, but to be able to go through these books and read the descriptions and be like, why have I never heard of this? I think that's really eye-opening to kind of see when you're scrolling through the available books or you're scrolling through the available podcasts and things. you would think, man, this story should be trending on TikTok right now or whatever. But you never heard it because at some point, maybe but it was before TikTok, maybe it was before Twitter's, community notes kind of, era, where these stories are being completely suppressed. And it's wild to kind of see that. And so the seeing where Arweave started, it kind of, again, hearing all this makes you realize why the people that are truly there, let's say the people from community labs, I love that team, the team from community labs, all the forward research people, all of the people from Longview labs, all of the different apps and organizations, Arweave India, Arweave Oasis, Arweave Africa, they're there not to get rich. Nobody's idea was ever to get rich or anything like that inside the Arweave ecosystem. It was there to speak truth and to, give truth to power, and giving people a voice that just honestly never had the opportunity to be a voice or were suppressed to some degree. I think that's why I'm so bullish on the Arweave ecosystem, because now that we have the AO compute layer, we have this like DeFi thing kind of happening. We just had our first stable coin launched in testnet a few days ago, and a few weeks ago. I think 2 weeks ago, and now all of these tokens and things inside the Arweave ecosystem are super easy to deploy. If you go to my Twitter, I have a video on how to deploy your first token in 60 seconds. It's wild, and so it's really, really easy to do. So there's this DeFi layer that's happening, and the feedback that I'm getting is that nobody had any interest in Arweave because, they didn't know why they'd be interested in the first place. But now they're coming and they're like, okay, we're here kind of for the DeFi, but what is all this? Like, what is all this crazy storage? What is all this information that's here? And seeing that feedback is, it's cool because we've been doing this for years in the quiet, grinding, doing the best we can to develop an infrastructure that allows people to have that voice. And then suddenly we build AO and people are coming and they're like, oh, super bullish on this. This is really cool. The token price freaking, to the moon kind of thing. But they're also seeing that this isn't a project that just woke up yesterday and, came to be known. This is a project that started 6 years ago, all because Sam read the Gulag Archipelago and he was inspired by that kind of, power to voice, and that power to voice and that mission attracted all the right people. So all the people that have been like here, to be perfectly honest, I think I'm one of the newest people on the team, and everybody else that have been building, they've been here for a minute. They've been here since, every time I talk to somebody on the team, like, oh yeah, I discovered it back in 2018 and stuff like that. I'm like, oh damn, okay. I was kind of building and stuff a little bit in 2020, but I'm still young in comparison to team. And these people have been building into it for years. I will say a little bit of like token price thing. It's interesting to see that these people have been building when the price has been consistently, roughly like $5 or something like that. And nobody really cared about the Arweave token price. But everybody started caring when AO became a thing. Llama, gets launched on AO, and all this DeFi capability started changing. And now the price is 40 something dollars to date. And it's interesting to see that people are taking notice with that price change, but they're also taking notice that like we've been building, we've never taken a break, and this ecosystem is just it has the most robust infrastructure that anybody's ever seen. There's not a whole lot of like, oh, this thing will be capable of this. Arweave has been capable of so much long before anybody really speculated anything with AO the computer. So Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's kind of hard to wrap it up from there, but yeah.
No, that was great. I think it's interesting how attention comes towards ecosystems just because of the fiat pricing of the token or the coin.
Yeah.
Like, it blows my mind. Bitcoin protocol really is not going to change over the next 18 months relatively. And yet when it hits 100,000, 125,000, wherever it goes, all of a sudden people are going to see more value in it just because of its price. And that's an interesting just thing in our society where people put attention towards price. You
Yeah.
could have a water bottle that's $5, but all of a sudden those Stanley Cup things blow up. I remember when I went back to the States and I'm like, this brings the same utility, but the price drives the attention. So just it's kind of the way I guess it's the way we as a humanity just kind of look at things, especially over digital networks as well. It's just so easy for something to get exciting. Yeah, you guys are in the top 50 on CoinMarketCap. So if you've been listening to this and you're like, oh, I've never heard of Arweave before, it's in the top 50 on CoinMarketCap. So it
We
is
just crossed over $3 billion
market cap.
$3 billion market cap. Yeah.
Exactly. So top 50 market cap and CoinMarketCap just crossed 3 billion, which is insane. Before we close out, I want to give you a chance to kind of talk about where people can get in touch with you if they're a developer and they want to get more into the ecosystem or they just want to learn more. There's probably like 20 links we could probably put there, just due to all the links you personally have, all the links that Arweave has that I've looked at. But if you want to shout out some, especially maybe your Twitter, I guess that's probably where someone could DM you and say, hey, Patrick, I want to learn more, right?
Yeah. So definitely my Twitter handle is pskinnertech, and very easy, very easy to find me. And I will say to the engineers, we have some amazing, what we call cookbooks. We call our documentation cookbooks. And I'm literally trying to create new tutorial videos almost every single day. Videos are paramountly important, and they continue to become more important for engineers day by day, especially since we're in a society that's almost raised on social media. I'm putting out new tutorial videos on my Twitter or on, the AO, the computer, that Twitter handle as well. But you're going to see most of my videos inside of the documentation. So the documentation, you can go to all of the URLs kind of, in the same way. It's permaweb.arweave.dev. Then we have cookbook.arweave.dev, which is kind of like a bit of a documentation about building with the Permaweb. And then we have the AO cookbook, which is that computation layer. This is my you don't have to be an engineer to actually build with AO. You will have to do a little bit of coding, but I make the tutorials so ridiculously easy that anybody can actually get into AO and start building with it. And it's we use the coding language Lua. So if you look up like Lua tutorials, most of the stuff is like Lua with Roblox and stuff like that. It's meant like it's such an easy language that they teach it to like 9 and 10-year-olds. And so I highly recommend anybody to give it a shot and go through some of the stuff. All of the cookbooks, if they aren't now, they will be full of tutorial videos. That's kind of like my main thing that I like to do. And the AO cookbook is cookbook_AO.arweave.dev. And most of those pages have some sort of tutorial from me, video from me. So you can learn a lot about launching tokens, building, active chat rooms on chain. You can do all of that in like less than 60 seconds. And then from there, if you just want to check out, the Arweave ecosystem and just see what's available, we do have to do an update because there's so much more available now. But arweave.org is a great website to be able to go and just see what's available. Permacast is on there, the podcast platform. I think we'll have Typer on there, which is like an AO version of Twitter. That will be on there very, very soon. All of the cookbooks, all of the like documentation, everything is on there. Our white paper is on there. Everything that if you really want to learn a lot about the Arweave ecosystem, it's mostly there. But if you really want to get all of the new tutorials as an engineer or just general information too, you can follow Arweave Eco on Twitter. Spelled out that way. The handle is Arweave Eco. And AO the computer, spelled out that way. Myself, P Skinner Tech. And then I think Sam's is Sam C. Williams is his Twitter handle. He's the co-founder of Arweave. Highly recommend following him because we're being a lot more vocal than we used to be, simply because the things that have become immediately possible now with AO the computer has really changed the game inside of Arweave. So I would say that's the main links that I would go for. If you ever have any questions or anything like that, if you're a developer, if you're a non-developer, you want to learn, how to get into the Arweave ecosystem, you want to learn how wallet systems and stuff work, if you want to build a Permaweb page with no code, hit me up anytime. I will happily help anybody and everybody.
Sweet. That's great. I will put all those links down in the episode description. And I think before I go too, I want to give a shout out to Monica Talan. She was the one who said, "Oh, you're in Bogota? You got to find Patrick Skinner." So we did find each other. Yeah. I love her as well. She's also been on More Than Blockchain talking about Crypto Conexion. So no matter where you're watching the podcast, please go ahead or listening to it and subscribe, whether that's on a podcast platform or YouTube. Follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. And if you enjoyed this, please go ahead and share it with a friend, family member, colleague, someone who would be interested in finding a way to store things permanently on the internet. Patrick, this has been great. Thank you so much. And I feel like once you drop that video and just in the future, might be good to do a check-in as things develop, because it looks like you guys are building out that ecosystem to, provide as much value as possible.
Yeah. I thank you so much. Awesome podcast. I've been a follower for a while now since we met. So, and I've always loved your short videos as well. So massive shout out to that too.
Well, thanks, man. I'll hopefully see you in Bogota soon.
Yep. Most definitely. Play some hockey.